have the opportunity to speak to them and do so that I don't embarrass myself. So, Professor Hoodbhoy.
I'm going to talk as little as I can because my voice is going to give out very shortly. So, as I understand it, we talked about minorities, which to me means those citizens of Pakistan who have less than full citizenship rights. This includes Hindus, Sikhs, Ahmadis, Christians, and now that definition is increasing to include Shias perhaps as well. We have been in the past tolerant of minorities, but toleration is not the same as giving full citizenship rights. The Constitution of Pakistan explicitly differentiates between those who are Muslim and those who are not. In the past, and this goes back maybe 40 years or so, it wasn't so bad for the minorities. Those who had opted to stay after partition kept staying there as long as they could. It's in the last 20 years or so, maybe 30 years, that the space for such people has been shrunk to a point where they feel embattled, where they feel their children have no future in this country, and which is why one is seeing a steady exodus of every minority that there is in Pakistan. Perhaps it was natural that this should come to be, because behind the creation of Pakistan was a very simple principle articulated by Mr. Jinnah, who said that on this subcontinent there live two peoples, one who are Muslims and the other who are Hindus. They have had historical differences, they belong to different cultures, they eat differently, they have different heroes and so forth, and so they cannot live together. The assumption was that all Muslims could comfortably live together as one nation. That turned out to be not quite the case after 1971, where the East Pakistanis, who were the majority of Pakistanis at that time, chose to leave the Union after a very bloody war. Thereafter, it has been all the way downhill for every minority that there is. Speaking of myself, when I was growing up in Karachi, my neighbors were Christians. There were even a couple of Hindus, and there were lots of Parsis, Zoroastrians there. Now the total population of Zoroastrians, Parsis in Karachi is said to be less than 6,000, 7,000. The Hindus are leaving by the droves, and perhaps the most embattled of all peoples are the Ahmadis, who are forbidden from praying, who are forbidden from even basic privileges, who cannot be buried in a Muslim graveyard, and if there are lots of examples of Ahmadis whose graves have been redug and their bodies shifted elsewhere. 100 of them or so were murdered while praying here in Lahore, with very little said by the majority. It was a non-event for most people in Pakistan. And therefore it is not surprising that a lot of them want to leave, and some have left. One could say that this is the natural consequence of having a country that was based upon religion. But of course it wasn't like this in the first 20, 30 years of the country. Now it has become that reality. Think of yourself. If you should belong to any one of these minorities, Hindus, Christians, whatever, Would you like that fact to be known? You would have no future in this country if you were to advertise yourself as any one of these minorities. And so therefore you have a tragic situation in which Christians have changed their name. If it is Masih at the end, they have altered that, made it something else. People are even afraid to show that they belong to any of these religious minorities. So, this is a situation that has steadily developed. It has created a situation of terror for every one of these minorities, but in recent times, more for the Shias than for anybody else. It's now a daily occurrence that so many are gunned down in Parachinar, in Kurram, in Quetta. If you are identified as a Hazara, and that you can easily be just by your facial features, well then your life is in immediate danger. All this happens in full view of the state. The Rangers are present almost where these assassinations take place. And typically it's some people who come by on a motorcycle, they stand, they wait for the Shias to arrive, gun them down, and calmly walk away. There has been incident after incident of this. And even as the security forces are present, they do not do anything. But it's not just the security forces that you can blame. The rest of the country is silent. There is no anguish. There is no anger. Why? Because these are less than full citizens of Pakistan. At best, they can be tolerated. But their lives don't carry much meaning. They are, in a sense, foreigners, even though they have grown up over here. Therefore, I do not think it is the security forces alone or the government alone which is to be blamed. This is something that the entire country is responsible for. It's that attitude of indifference. We therefore have a situation where we are not a nation. We are disparate peoples living on the same geographical piece of land. We do not have empathy for those who have a religion different from that of the mainstream. Now let me say that this is a differentiation that has steadily increased over time. Nobody wants to hear today that Muhammad Ali Jinnah was a Shia. He was. It's a fact. And yet, now there are distortions, there are things which are being pulled out from here and there. Quotes of his that there was no Shia and Sunni at the time of the Prophet. But, in fact, if you look at any of his authentic biographies, that's what he was. So, in reserving our sympathies for the religious majority and ignoring the safety and security of the minorities, Pakistan is placing itself in a very difficult position. Because this definition of who constitutes a majority and who constitutes a minority is a very tricky one. The Shias at no point during the struggle for Pakistan thought that they would be shunted out in this way. The Ahmadis never thought that either. Chaudhry Zafarullah was the first foreign minister of Pakistan, put there by Mr. Jinnah himself. And today they regret that they went with Pakistan. I don't want to take more time. I'm glad this very important subject was taken up. I doubt that there can be a solution that this panel can prescribe and which will actually have any impact. It's so basic. It should be apparent to everyone that it doesn't matter what your religion is. you should have the same rights as anybody else if you're a citizen of that state. We consciously discriminate. If you want a solution, let's put out a recommendation saying that the state should be blind in matters of religion. It should not differentiate between who is what, as long as he or she carries the green passport or has a national identity card. That person should be entitled to exactly the same benefits, to the same rules, the same laws as any other citizen of Pakistan.
Just sort of putting this in a slightly different context before I move on to this last meeting. The religion of the state of Pakistan, in the constitution itself, as Professor Hoodbhoy just said, specifically states, Article 2 of the Constitution specifically states that the religion of the state shall be Islam. Subsequently, in the 1970s, after the writing of the Constitution, there was a specific legal intervention by the Parliament to declare the Ahmadis to be non-Muslims. Just think about that before I move on to the next panel. Just think about that. What that means is that a business which is strictly between, even according to the religion, a business which is strictly between you and God, as to whether you're a Muslim or not, whether you're a Hindu or not, whether you're Christian or not, 342 people, most of whom are probably a lot less educated than you are, a lot less exposure of the world than you have, got together and voted as to whether you are in fact a Muslim or not. That is what we've done here. There are few individuals who, by the way, have no background in religious theology, have no real background or training in this regard, and even if they did, that would be separate. In this particular instance, the Parliament of Pakistan, which is secular in nature, has by law stated that your relationship with God is such that you are not Muslim. That is what Professor Hoodbhoy has described, and that has created a subclass within what we had aspired to be a classless society.